Since our last episode, supershoe technology has continued to dominate international running. With our local Melbourne Marathon nearing and even more running shoe choices than ever, running shoe selection has become overwhelming. Today, Track Club speak with the former Australian 5,000 metre champ and now Maltese representative Jordan Gusman, who is based over in Boulder, Colorado with the adidas Tinman Elite, to gain an insight into a professional runner's shoe rotation. Rotation shoe selection, an area we see with patients probably misinterpreted a lot. Some people think it means just a different shoe every day, but we're more thought different shoes for different purposes. We wanted to have a discussion on what shoes you're wearing at the moment in your lineup and what sort of training you're doing as well in relation to those shoes.
A little bit of research in this space, not a lot, to suggest that rotating shoes does help in terms of preventing running-related injuries. So keen to understand kind of what's involved in terms of selection and the type of shoes you're wearing on your feet.
I mean, overall, with spikes included, I probably rotate through 7 or 8 pairs. Just general trainers, I would say 3. So I feel like I'm a bit backwards from some of the other guys on the team. Like when they're feeling fatigued or they're feeling sore, they go for like a softer, spongier shoe, which we can see in here. So this is like the everyday trainer, which is the Solar Glide. So it's got like the boost foam in the heel, and they really like that a lot. It's a lot softer. And then they just have like a EVA in the midsole, which is a little firmer. Honestly, I tend to go for something that has more EVA in it. I really like to get a response from the ground. And, if I'm feeling more tired and fatigued, I like to feel more poppy rather than feel softer and sink into the shoe. So for a lot of my doubles, I'll use these, and this is the Supernova. And it's just got a stiffer, firmer, more responsive foam throughout most of the shoe and just a little bit more cushioning. So I go for those a lot. And the other shoe that I tend to rotate through, which is mostly seen as like a training flat. But this is like in the new range of the super shoe. It's the Boston 10s, and this is the Tinman edition. So this actually has Light Strike Pro foam, which is a little firmer, a little more responsive than the common EVA, and that's through the midfoot. And then it's bottomed with just a regular EVA. And it has some carbon rods in here as well. So if I'm feeling really tired on an easy day or a double run, then I'll tend to use these. And I usually use these for long runs, especially up-tempo runs, because it still offers a good bit of support. It's got a lot of stack height here, but at the same time, it feels responsive, it feels fast. Having to pick one shoe that was an everyday shoe, I would pick these just because I feel like I can run fast, I can stride out in them. I've done track workouts in these, and I've also done most of my mileage in these. So when I went to Europe in the middle of the year, this is actually the only pair of shoe I took, and I did track workouts in these. I did easy runs in these, and I just had 2 pairs of these, and I rotated between an easy run pair and a workout pair, and it worked really well. And that was probably the best training block I'd had and the best racing block I'd had. So this by far is like my favorite easy running shoe.
Tell us a little bit about the Tinman collaboration with the shoe design there.
Yeah, we got pretty lucky with this shoe. We had the Boston 10 and then a spike. So I don't know if you can see that, but in the stripes here, it has like a TME. We've got the Tinman logo replacing the adidas logo on this side. And then our colors from the beginning of being gold. So we stuck with that through there. And then in the sole here, we've got like a little Tinman logo. So that was really cool. We had like a lot of creative control over this and the spike, and we have a few different shoes coming out throughout the whole range of the adidas footwear next year. So this was just the beginning, but we pretty much have a colorway in all of the shoes, which is exciting.
Just the aesthetics of the shoe, are you providing any feedback on the design and the construction of the shoe at all?
We're providing a little bit of feedback, like the Adios Pro. It's into the Adios Pro 2 now, which I'll show you a little later on, but we actually sampled like the first edition of that and provided a good bit of feedback. And the same with the spikes, the Avantis. We tested out like the first edition of those. So I wouldn't say we're making any changes in terms of structure, but we're definitely giving feedback on what works and what doesn't work. With these, this was already like a preset shoe, so we just had control over the colorways per se. But yeah, over the past year, adidas has reached out to the team and asked for feedback on different samples of shoes, and yeah, it's been fun working with them with that sort of stuff.
So just to put things into perspective, as an elite runner yourself, what are you doing your easy runs? Like, what kind of pace would that be when you're wearing your suit?
Right now, I tend to run around 6:20 pace, which I think in kilometers is pretty much bang on 4 minutes per kilometer. And I'll run that for 8 miles pretty much most mornings outside of workout days. So that's 12 and a half, 13 kilometers.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much my standard run. Like sometimes I'll run a little bit quicker if we have like a midweek long run, and I'll run 10 to 12 miles, so 16 to 18 kilometers at 6 minute pace. So probably pushing down on 3:45 kilometer pace. And if I do any of those sort of runs, it's in this year.
Yeah, a lot of people, when they're getting running shoes, they'll be judging how good the shoe is based upon, the feeling in the shop or wearing it for a very short period of time. But as a runner, how long does it take you to decide if a shoe is going to work for you or not?
It's funny, I really hated this shoe when I first put it on. It was too tight, like the top of my foot hurt. And it just felt like I was tightening my laces too tight. The shoe box was too narrow. And like I said, I wore it for that week, and I just thought that I was going to be warming up in it. And after about a week to 10 days, I feel like my foot molded in, the laces kind of loosened up, and the upper loosened up a little bit. And I really fell in love with them. And now I kind of take my inserts out of those shoes that I wore and slip them in just so it has the mold of my foot in them already into my new shoes. That lets me kind of blend into the next pair of shoes a little bit easier. And then every few pairs, then I'll just kind of cop the new insert just to make sure that I'm not wearing any crazy patterns in those. But yeah, I would say probably 2 weeks, even in shoes that I've worn multiple times before, like the Solar Glides here. This is a brand new pair, but I just started in another pair that I'm wearing right now. And I just kind of phased back into these just because coach didn't want me running in this super shoe, the Boston 10, for all my easy runs. And it was a model that I'd liked in the past, but I never really fell in love with. And it probably took me about a week of me wearing this shoe where I really hated it and I really just wanted to run in my Bostons, but coach kept urging me to run in this thing. And then after, a week had passed, I thought, hang on, these are actually pretty good now. So yeah. I would say a week to 2 weeks to really feel it out and kind of, get comfortable in the shoe. You definitely can't go from first wear if you're going to love it or not. So I would at least give it 2 weeks just to see how you kind of phase into it.
Going on to kind of super shoes and shoes with plates in, when you first wore a super shoe,
I sampled one of the first shoes and I thought it was like unlike anything I'd ever worn before. And then I kind of missed like the first edition of the super shoe. So I didn't really get to wear it until the start of this year. And the first few wears, it kind of felt funny. And even now, I'm probably one of the few on the team, like I keep saying, where I really like a responsive feel. Like if I'm racing a road mile, I want something with as little cushion as possible where I really feel the ground, I really feel poppy. And that really isn't the super shoe, like you do feel a little springy, but that foam is incredibly soft. And it took a little bit of getting used to, but I think just like the propulsion of the carbon rods in Adidas's case, or the carbon plate, I think really pushes you along and you kind of feel bouncy, but I just tend to like sink into those shoes. So it took me a long time, and I think longer than a lot of the other guys, to really get used to those shoes, just because I'd come from wearing very minimal shoes on the roads in most cases. Like I ran a lot of road 10K races when I was back home in Australia, and I would go for, a training track flat for those sort of races, just because I liked that responsive feel. I liked feeling what was underneath me and, getting good contact on the ground. So yeah, it probably took me 2 or 3 months of training those things to really get used to them and really like them and feel like they were giving me an advantage. And the spikes are kind of that middle ground, I guess, where it doesn't have quite the stack height because you feel very high off the ground in the super shoes. And the spikes don't quite have that stack height. They have the very stiff foam and the carbon rod responsive, but it also feels very minimal and light on your foot. So I instantly fell in love with the spikes, but it took a very long time for me in the super shoes.
Do you feel they do give you an advantage?
Yeah, definitely. I think in training, like there's been instances where I've worn just a very typical flat for one workout, and then I've run that workout, the week later in those shoes. And I've, gone from running 3-minute kilometers to running 250 in, an 8x K session or something like that. And not only does it help with pacing, I think like the recovery time, like these road races that I've run in the past in those flats, it's taken me a week to 10 days to really feel recovered. Whereas the super shoes, I feel recovered in 2 days, just because I think it takes a lot of the loading out of your lower leg. And even if it does push those elsewhere, the recovery time from running in those is monumental. So I think that's where a lot of the advantage is coming from with people training in super shoes, is that they're just recovering so much quicker. You see so often now in, every marathon, not just in the elite category, but with every, day runners, most of them are wearing these super shoes now because they know how much of an advantage it is. And they are a costly shoe to get into. And I mean, it raises the entry cost of the sport. I think, having to have those shoes just to be able to compete nowadays. But yeah, I think 90% of people in, all the road races across the world, just everyday runners are wearing those things. So yeah, if you're not wearing them now, it's kind of hard to compete, not only with your competitors, but with yourself and your previous times.
Yeah, interesting. Chatting to you in the middle of the year, I know at the time you'd battled quite a chronic history of tibialis posterior tendinopathy. And you actually mentioned to me at the time you'd had an opportunity to do a decent amount of mileage in the new super shoes and were starting to get into full swing again. And you said you felt that your tib post discomfort had virtually disappeared. What shoe was that?
Yeah, it was actually this Boston was like I had a lot of trouble with my post tib, and I was still feeling that, day in, day out with some of the other shoes. And then yeah, when I went over to Europe, long story short, I took these 2 pairs just because I like to warm up in a more responsive shoe. And I was only supposed to be over there for 3 days. And I didn't realize that I needed an exemption to get back into the US, which took a month to get back. So I was stuck in Europe with just 2 pairs of these shoes. And it ended up after a week of just straight running in this, that I couldn't feel my post tib pain anymore. And so I think what they're noticing now with the carbon rods and the carbon plates is that the loading is kind of dissipated, and it's not so much in the lower legs. And I haven't had so much lower leg or foot injuries right now, and a lot of the teams have been the same. Like we've struggled a lot with Achilles injuries and post-tib injuries, which we seem to be clear of now, but a lot of people have started developing like lower hamstring or high hamstring into the glute injuries from wearing these super shoes. So we went through a phase where we were pretty much, running in these shoes and then working out in the Adios Pros. And we've just kind of like tried to pull back on that. And we're getting back into working out in more traditional flats without any of the carbon stuff, just because we were struggling with a lot of high hamstring, low hamstring problems.
This is definitely bridging the gap though, since they've got their super shoes out. I was just looking at podium finishes in the marathon. I think it was 14 with the Vaporfly to 12 with the Adios Pro now. So they certainly bridged the gap. And even when they had that meet at the headquarters, a couple of world records were broken there as well. Do you actually have the Adios too there? And what do you use that for training wise?
I've been trying to stay out of it a little bit. And just with the way the roads work here in Boulder, especially this time of year. So here's the Adios Pro 2. It's pretty similar to Adios Pro 1, I just think they changed like some of the grip here. So it wore very easily, and you could actually see the carbon rods through like the forefront after a few wears. So it really wore out quickly. So they've just changed that, and they've just added like a little bit more foam in the forefoot here, still within the stack height restrictions. But I really struggle wearing this, just obviously with the history of lower leg injuries I've had in Boulder. Obviously, we train on dirt roads a lot. If we get any rain, they're usually high traffic, farming roads. It just tends to be bumpy and divotty. So I would use this on the roads or on the track, honestly. Like we use these things on the track a lot, but on the dirt roads, it's really hard to use because I feel like I roll my ankle in these things a lot. Like they're just a little bit too tall for me. And I usually opt for this, which is the Adios, which is just less stack height, closer to the ground, a little bit safer for the dirt roads. But this just has, just a torsion plate, which is old technology, but no carbon rods or anything in that one. But yeah, I mean, this gets the most response from the roads. So the dirt roads, and I've tried these on turf. I know Melbourne Track Club use their super shoes on the turf a lot, but it just seems too soft where you don't get the, maximum response from this thing on that softer surface. So track, they're really good. Road, they're really good, but I definitely recommend not wearing these on dirt or trails.
About your training in the US, how's that changed? Because you always said even you run a 6:20 mile pace, but that's at altitude, so it's a lot quicker, really. How's the training changed in the US to how you train in Australia?
The first like 6 months I was over here, training was very similar. And I mean, as you know, in the past, I'd come over for training camps here, and I'd been here for 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And I feel like I really went well early on and midway through. And then at the end of the camp, things started to really go south for me. And I'd either come back really tired or come back, with some niggling injuries and that sort of stuff. And one of the main contributors of that, I think, was that I just wasn't recovering well enough. And I was just kind of coming here with the same mentality that I had at sea level, which is run fast every day. That gets you fitter, run my strides really hard, run my workouts really hard. And the better I can do that, the fitter I'm going to get, the quicker. And it just really didn't work out. Maybe it did for 3 or 4 weeks. But in the long run, it just wasn't smart. And we've seen over the past 2 years how detrimental that has been just with my injuries. And so one of the things we've changed, which I spoke to with coach a lot, was we transitioned into a 10-day cycle. So rather than typical Tuesday workout, Friday workout, which was the difference, I guess, from an American coach to an Australian coach, where we would work out Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, long run Sunday. So we're working out Tuesday, Friday, long run Sunday at this point. Now we basically will long run on the first day of this 10-day cycle, have 2 days easy. We'll work out again on the 4th day, and then we'll have 3 days between the next workout. And the middle day, we'll either do a medium long run, which is 10 to 12 miles at that 6-minute pace, or we'll actually, and we're doing this a lot right now leading into indoors where it's still kind of cold. We'll go to the track for our second run of the day, and we'll run 8 times 200 at 5K pace or 1500 pace. And that just kind of, it's allowed me more recovery, and I feel like I'm at my healthiest right now, having that extra day before, running a hard workout. And it also allows me to run at the pace, which at the time I felt was comfortable, but maybe was detrimental in the long run. So having those 2 days kind of easy between workouts has really benefited me.
And I guess one other question that kind of is fairly relevant in terms of what I get asked in the clinic is around what do you wear on your feet when you're not running? So
yeah, I mean, it has to be adidas, obviously. If I'm in the gym or something like that, I tend to wear like something, like this, which is pretty minimal. And I like to squat and lift and that sort of stuff. My everyday casual, something like this, like the Stan Smith or something, obviously all white, so it gets dirty. up here pretty quickly. But yeah, it's something that's comfortable, but feels good on the feet, easy to slip on and off, because I feel like most of the time I'm either running or recovering. And the times that I do go out, it's, to the physio or something like that, where I'm slipping my shoes on all the time. So yeah, it's usually just something like that I can just slip on and off very quickly, and they're very comfortable.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Jordan. That's great to get your insight footwear, and a very good point about the training and with the workouts, because I think a lot of Australians here tend to overdo the workouts, the 3 workouts a week, and talking to a lot of the better runners in the US, it's 2 in a week, sometimes only 2 to 3 over a 10-day period. So yeah, recovery steps are very important.
Yeah, and I think the message about the 2-week wearing in cycle is really important, because I think a lot of people are very influenced by what a fit shoe feels like the second they put it on. And I think it's really important to actually consider, that the shoe does take a bit of wearing in.
Forward to seeing your results. I know you're a little bit run down with a bit of a cold on the weekend, so when you're at fully we should see some exciting races on the track more so.
Fingers crossed.
Awesome. Take care, mate.
Some great points from Jordan there in his discussion regarding his shoe rotation. One of the things that was quite interesting with his daily jogger, he didn't go for the most expensive shoe in the Adidas lineup. I was just looking through the Adidas lineup there, and it was a very mid-range shoe, retail price of $160. If we look at the upper range shoes, they're $300, $400. So just because the shoe's the most expensive in the shop doesn't necessarily, it means it's the best. Is that something you find, John?
Oh, certainly. Like in terms of shoes, you often find that a lot of the technology in the top end shoes may not necessarily be suitable for you as a runner. So often you're kind of spending extra money on features or things to add weight to the shoe that you don't actually need. I think people can often be quite influenced by new technology or a shoe being marketed as the best thing for your feet, but in reality often it's not that simple, and actually finding a shoe that you're comfortable in is actually quite a challenge sometimes. And when you do find a comfortable shoe, we typically recommend to kind of stick with what you know, and the grass isn't always greener on the other side, particularly when it comes in terms of chopping and changing your shoes.
Yeah, particularly a lot of patients get sucked in. They see the marketing for a new model come out. This is the new answer to all my running problems, and this is going to solve it. But if you do find a shoe that you like, is working for you, you're getting consistent training, no niggles, I quite often encourage people to stay with it. That may even mean stocking up on that shoe, because as we've found with some companies, they do vary their shoes quite a bit over the years. There's not a lot of consistency in the model. So if you do find a shoe that you like, it sometimes can have a little bit of bearing with the breakdown of foam as the shoe ages, but I encourage people to buy up on their shoes. As in with the foam life cycles, what would you say to that, John?
Again, it will vary from shoe to shoe, and with some of the newer technologies, it actually does decrease the life of a shoe. But typically, you'd expect for a runner that you're doing your daily runs in, I would normally look at changing them after about 400 to 500k, or at least assessing how the shoe's going at that point.